Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. What began as just a demolition of the facade of the east wing of the White House has now become a complete demolition of the entirety of the East Wing, the part that once served as a public entrance and the headquarters for the First Lady and her staff is now completely gone. All so that our president can build a 90,000 square foot ballroom that is now going to cost an excess of $300 million. When images emerged earlier this week of workers taking a backhoe to the facade of the White House and tearing up trees around it, that was bad enough. I thought, all right, this is bad. I talked about it. You knew what was going on. And I thought that would be it. I mean, it was awful. It was terrible. But that was as much as there was to the story. Look, they're tearing off the front so they can make this stupid ballroom. But this is a complete destruction of the area of the White House, all in service of constructing this ballroom that is larger than the White House itself. It dwarfs it. So now the ballroom is going to be the biggest part of the entire structure. Also, Donald Trump can host big balls to compensate for the fact that he has small ones. I can only imagine once it's complete just how ugly it's going to look stuck onto the side of the executive residence. And even past just the aesthetics and the fact this big, expensive ballroom is not going to look good as a part of the White House complex. It feels sort of bad optics in general that the first major renovation to the exterior of the White House in nearly a century is to build what's essentially just a big dance hall. And what message that sends to those abroad as to what the priorities of our leader and our government are right now, when the American people are about to not only pay massive amount in additional healthcare costs when their premiums go up at the beginning of next month, but people are running out of food, the ability to feed themselves and their families, because their SNAP benefits are about to run out of funding, I suppose. We have a president that fancies himself a king. He's playing the part. He is building his pleasure palace as his subjects starve and get sick and die. Nothing says I don't really care about the American people or American history like demolishing a part of a historic building and leaving his people to starve and die during a shutdown of the government that his party is supposed to be in control of and that he is the leader of. One that, despite claims from his own party, is largely because they refuse to negotiate on allowing Affordable Care Act subsidies to remain and for Medicare cuts to be rolled back. The people are suffering while their leader is building his big golden ballroom. Trump truly is our Nero and is fiddling while his Rome burns. The president is claiming that unnamed advisors told him, quote, "Sir, this is the White House. You're the president of the United States. You can do anything you want." Which leaves me wondering, which is more likely? Is it that he's completely fabricated this and just lied, as he is known to do, and simply doing whatever he wants and just saying, oh yeah, they told me I could do whatever I wanted? Or if there really were advisors within the White House that said that to him because they were afraid to say no to him. So everyone around him just says, yes, of course, Mr. President, you can do whatever you want. Tear down that part of the White House. It's fine. You don't have to wait for approval or zoning or anything. Just do it. Because they know if they don't, they will catch his anger and they can kiss their job goodbye. Honestly, both scenarios seem equally plausible, but I think the reality is likely somewhere in the middle. I don't think he asked anyone for approval, but I also think that there's no one within his inner circle who would have been willing to have stopped him and told him, no, you can't do that, even though, no, he can't do that. That's basically been the hallmark of his presidency and the way he's lived his life in general, daring people to stop him even when he does things that are absolutely and uncategorically wrong. Despite being the president of the United States, he does not have complete and unchecked authority to just demolish a part of the White House, because even though he is living there and he is the chief executive of the United States, that house doesn't belong to him. He is a temporary resident. He does not have the authority to demolish a part of it without going through the proper channels, which I think he knows, but he just doesn't care. While he's unsurprisingly suffered no pushback from those within his inner circle, there has been pushback from outside. He was sued by a couple in Virginia trying to halt the construction of this ballroom and the destruction of the east wing of the White House. They asked the federal judge to issue a temporary restraining order to stop the demolition, saying that the project moved forward without, quote, legally required approval or review, which everyone absolutely believe. But unfortunately, at this point, it's a little bit too late. You can't undemolish the East Wing now. Even if they succeeded in halting the construction of the ballroom, the destruction is already done and can never be undone. The president really seems like the arsonist who says, you can arrest me, but you can never unburn down your house. And he's right. He effectively, if not literally, burned down a part of the people's house, our White House. Even if they managed to completely halt the ballroom construction, which I unfortunately don't believe is possible at this point, he has already destroyed a historic part of the White House. Even if some future president were to completely rebuild the East Wing to look exactly like it did prior to Donald Trump's destruction of it, it will never be what it used to be. It will always just be a reconstruction, a replacement for something that was lost and can never be regained. Speaking of destruction and fire, though, not since the British burned down the original White House back in 1812 have we seen such blatant destruction of the historic White House. Donald Trump really is our King George III. Both had the White House destroyed, both were known for their erratic behavior and mental health issues. Though King Donnie claims he is in perfect health and there's nothing wrong with his brain. At least King George could claim his issues stemmed from porphyria. I'm fairly sure our president doesn't have that excuse. Even Robert Kennedy Jr. could blame the worm that ate his brain. I don't think our president will admit that anything ate his brain, though if there were a worm in his head, I think it would have starved from lack of food. But really, the loss of the East Wing is tragic. It was a part of the building that was constructed in 1902, which was later renovated 40 years later in 1942. It was a physical piece of history that our president has literally discarded simply so he can build what is effectively a giant monument to himself. It seems almost ironic that Donald Trump has managed to do what the 9/11 terrorists themselves never managed to do and completely eradicate a part of the White House, a piece of American history, a symbol of America completely gone. I actually remember thinking when I first saw images of the destruction of what was then only the facade of the East Wing of the White House, that it looked like a bomb had gone off. It reminded me of images of the Alfred P. Murrow building in Oklahoma City after the Oklahoma City bombings, or the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. And while yes, it wasn't quite as complete a destruction, and this wasn't a literal act of terrorism, the fact that it elicited very similar emotions, I think really says something. Seeing a piece of the White House effectively blown up felt wrong. It felt painful in a certain way. And while many on the right will say, this was just a necessary renovation, it's just modernization, it sure doesn't feel like it. And I highly doubt if this was a Democratic president doing their so-called modernization and renovation, that they would be taking it so lightly and allow it to just happen without protest. They would be up in arms and saying, how dare he destroy part of our precious White House? He had no right to do that. And while I'd be loath to agree with them, in this case I absolutely agree. He had no right to do this. But hypocrisy is what the right is all about. So, of course, it's fine when their guy does it, but absolutely abhorrent and wrong when the opposition guy does it. And that's not even getting into the fact that a Democrat president would probably not have completely demolished the East Wing of the White House. And even if somehow they felt that it was a necessary modernization and renovation, they would have gone through the proper channels and gotten the proper okays because they follow the rules instead of just steamrolling and doing whatever they want, which is what Donald Trump and the Republicans are all about. They don't care about the rules unless it applies to someone else. But when it comes to them, the rules never apply. The laws never apply. It doesn't matter if they're allowed to do it, they just do it. Consequences mean nothing to them. Bottom line, the loss and complete destruction of the East Wing of the White House is a national tragedy. This thing only being made worse by knowing that it was done simply so that they could build a giant, ugly ballroom with tech billionaires' money. That ballroom is a national embarrassment, and what it costs to have it built is a national shame. And I don't mean monetarily costing. I mean, it does cost way too much money. $300 million for that disgusting building is way too much. But at least it's not being paid for with public money. So I guess there's that. But I mean the historical cost, the emotional cost, the cost to the American people as a whole. If President Trump and his supporters still had the capacity to feel shame, I would say they should feel ashamed about this, but I know that they are unable to. So I suppose it falls on the rest of us to feel the shame in their stead. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.